Arvanites are a bilingual population group in Greece who traditionally speak Arvanitika, a dialect of the Albanian language along with Greek. They settled in Greece during the late Middle Ages and were the dominant population element of some regions of the Peloponnese and Attica until the 19th century. Arvanites today self-identify as Greeks as the result of a process of assimilation, and do not consider themselves to belong to Albania or the Albanian nation. They call themselves Arvanites and Arbëror. The Arvanite communities in northwestern Greece call themselves Shqipta. Arvanitika is in a state of attrition due to language shift towards Greek and large-scale internal migration to the cities and subsequent intermingling of the population during the 20th century. History: Arvanites in Greece originated from Arvaniti, Albanian-speaking settlers who moved south at different times between the 13th and 16th century from the region Arvanon or Arvana, a region in what is today modern Albania and later Principality of Arvanon, an autonomous principality within the Byzantine Empire until 1204 and from 1205 within the Despotate of Epirus. The reasons for this migration are not entirely clear and may be manifold. In many instances the Arvanites were invited by the Byzantine and Latin rulers of the time. They were employed to resettle areas that had been largely depopulated through wars, epidemics, and other reasons, and they were employed as soldiers. Some later movements are also believed to have been motivated to evade Islamization after the Ottoman conquest. The main waves of migration into southern Greece started around 1300, reached a peak sometime during the 14th century, and ended around 1600. Arvanites first reached Thessaly, then Attica, and finally the Peloponnese. The poem Thorios by the 18th century poet and Greek national hero Rigas Virios included a call upon Arvanites, as upon other Christian Orthodox peoples living at the time in the general area of Greece, to join in rebelling against Ottoman rule. Indeed, during the Greek War of Independence, many Arvanites played an important role fighting on the Greek side against the Ottomans, often as national Greek heroes. With the formation of modern nations and nation-states in the Balkans, Arvanites have come to be regarded as an integral part of the Greek nation. In 1899, leading representatives of the Arvanites in Greece, among them descendants of the independence heroes, published a manifesto calling the fellow Albanians outside Greece to join in the creation of a common Albanian Greek state. During the 20th century, after the creation of the Albanian nation-state, Arvanites in Greece have come to dissociate themselves much more strongly from the Albanians, stressing instead the national self-identification as Greeks. At the same time, it has been suggested that many Arvanites in earlier decades maintained an assimilatory stance, leading to a progressive loss of the traditional language and a shifting of the younger generation towards Greek. At some times, particularly under the nationalist 4th of August regime under Ioannis Metaxas of 1936 to 1941, Greek state institutions followed a policy of actively discouraging and repressing the use of Arvanitika. In the decades following World War II and the Greek Civil War, many Arvanites came under pressure to abandon Arvanitika in favor of monolingualism in the national language, and especially the Archaizing Katharevousa, which remained the official variant of Greek until 1976. This trend was prevalent mostly during the Greek military junta of 1967 to 1974. Demographics: regions with a strong traditional presence of Arvanites are found mainly in a compact area in southeastern Greece, namely across Attica, southern Boeotia, the northeast of the Peloponnese, the south of the island of Euboea, the north of the island of Andros, and several islands of the Saronic Gulf including Salamis. In parts of this area they formed a solid majority until about 1900. Within Attica, parts of the capital Athens and its suburbs were Arvanitic until the late 19th century. There are also settlements in some other parts of the Peloponnese, and in Thotis. There are no reliable figures about the number of Arvanites in Greece today. A Venetian source of the mid-15th century estimates that 30,000 Albanians lived in the Peloponnese at the time. In the mid-19th century, Johann Georg van Hahn estimated the number in Greece between 173,000 and 200,000. The last official census figures available come from 1951. Since then, estimates of the numbers of Arvanites has ranged from 25,000 to 200,000. The following is a summary of the widely diverging estimates. 1928 census, 18,773 citizens self-identifying as Albanophone in all of Greece. 1951 census, 22,736 Albanophones. Furikis, estimated 70,000 Arvanites in Attica alone. Trudgal, Zavaras, estimated 140,000 in Attica and Boeotia together. Sas, estimated 50,000 Arvanitika speakers in all of Greece. Ethnologue, 2,000 to 150,000 Arvanites living in 300 villages. Federal Union of European Nationalities, 1,991 to 95,000 Albanians of Greece. Minority Rights Group International, 1,997 to 200,000 Arvanites of Greece. Jan Marcus, 25,000 Arvanites in Greece. Like the rest of the Greek population, Arvanites have been emigrating from the villages to the cities and especially to the capital Athens. This has contributed to the loss of the language in the younger generation. Names. The name Arvanites and its equivalents are today used both in Greek and in Arvanitika itself. In Standard Albanian, all three names are used: Arvanite, Arbëresha or Arbëra. The name Arvanita and its equivalents go back to an old ethnonym that used in Greek to refer to the inhabitants of the region Arvanon or Arvana, a region in what is today modern Albania. It has been first attested by the Byzantine Greek historian Michael Attaliates in his book, History, written in 1079 to 1080, in which Attaliates refers to them as part of a mercenary army and as subjects of the Duke of Dyrrhachium at the time. Nikephoros Basilex. In later usage, it has been used to describe Albanian speakers. In Albanian language, the self-designation Arbëra, which is still in use by Arvanites and Arbëresha of Italy, had been exchanged for the new name Shqiptar since the 17th century, an innovation that was not shared by the Albanophone migrant communities in the south of Greece. The alternative exonym Albanians may ultimately be etymologically related, but is of less clear origin. It was probably conflated with that of the Arbanitae at some stage due to phonological similarity. In later Byzantine usage, the terms Arbanitae and Albanoi, with a range of variants, were used interchangeably, while sometimes the same groups were also called by the classicizing names Illyrians. In the 19th and early 20th century, Albani was used predominantly in formal registers, while Arvanites amongst the wider Greek-speaking population until the interwar period and used in descriptive indiscriminately for both Muslim and Christian Albinophones inside and outside Greece. In the course of the 20th century, it became customary to use only alpha, lambda, beta, alpha, nu, omicron, iota for the people of Albania, and only alpha, rho, beta, alpha, nu, iota, tau, epsilon, sigma for the Greek Arvanites, thus stressing the national separation between the two groups. There is some uncertainty to what extent the term Arvanites also includes the small remaining Christian Albinophone population groups in Epirus and West Macedonia. Unlike the southern Arvanites, these speakers are reported to use the name Shqiptar both for themselves and for Albanian nationals, although these communities also espouse a Greek national identity nowadays. The word Shqiptar is also used in a few villages of Thrace, where Arvanites migrated from the mountains of Pindus during the 19th century. However, they also use the name Arvanites speaking in Greek, while the Euromosaic reports notes that the designation Chams is today rejected by the group. The report by GHM subsumes the Epirot Albinophones under the term Arvanites, although it notes the different linguistic self-designation, on the other hand, applies the term Arvanites only to the populations of the compact Arvanitic settlement areas in southern Greece, in keeping with the self-identification of those groups. Linguistically, the ethnologue identifies the present-day Albanian Arvanitic dialects of northwestern Greece with those of the Chams, and therefore classifies them together with Standard Tosca Albanian as opposed to Arvanitika Albanian proper. Nevertheless, it reports that in Greek the Epirus varieties are also often subsumed under Arvanitika in a wider sense. It puts the estimated number of Epirus Albinophones at 10,000. Arvanitika proper is said to include the outlying dialects spoken in Thrace, language use and language perception, while Arvanitika was commonly called Albanian in Greece until the 20th century. The wish of Arvanites to express their ethnic identification as Greeks has led to a stance of rejecting the identification of the language with Albanian as well. In recent times, Arvanites had only very imprecise notions about how related or unrelated their language was to Albanian. Since Arvanitika is almost exclusively a spoken language, Arvanites also have no practical affiliation with the standard Albanian language used in Albania, as they do not use this form in writing or in media. The question of linguistic closeness or distance between Arvanitika and Albanian has come to the forefront especially since the early 1990s, when a large number of Albanian immigrants began to enter Greece and came into contact with local Arvanitic communities. Since the 1980s, there have been some organized efforts to preserve the cultural and linguistic heritage of Arvanites. The largest organization promoting Arvanitika is the Arvanitic League of Greece. Minority status. Arvanites were regarded as ethnically distinct from the Greeks in the 19th century. Amongst the Arvanites, this difference was expressed in words such as shkulgira for a Greek person and shkulherishte for the Greek language that had until recent decades negative overtones. These words in Arvanitika have the related counterpart in the pejorative term shqa used by northern Albanians for Slavosis. Ultimately, these terms, used amongst Albanian speakers, originate from the Latin word sclavis, which contained the traditional meaning of the neighboring foreigner. With participation in the Greek War of Independence and the Greek Civil War, this has led to increasing assimilation amongst the Arvanites. The common Christian Orthodox religion they shared with the rest of the local population was one of the main reasons that led to their assimilation. Although sociological studies of Arvanite communities still used to note and identify undeniable sense of a special ethnic identity among Arvanites. The authors did not identify a sense of belonging to Albania or to the Albanian nation. Many Arvanites find the designation Albanians offensive, as they identify nationally and ethnically as Greeks and not Albanians. Relations between Arvanites and other Albanian-speaking populations have varied over time. During the onset of the Greek War of Independence, Arvanites fought alongside Greek revolutionaries and against Muslim Albanians. For example, Arvanites participated in the Tripolita massacre of Muslim Albanians, while some Muslim Albanian speakers in the region of Bardunia remained after the war by converting to Orthodoxy and becoming part of the local population. In recent times, Arvanites have expressed mixed opinions towards Albanian immigrants within Greece. Negative views are perceptions that Albanian immigrants are communists arriving from a backward country, or an opportune people with questionable morals, behaviors and a disrespect for religion, whereas other Arvanites during the late 1980s and early 1990s expressed solidarity with Albanian immigrants due to linguistic similarities and being politically leftist. Relations between Arvanites and other Orthodox Albanian-speaking communities such as those of Greek Epirus are mixed, as they are distrusted regarding religious matters due to a past Albanian Muslim population living amongst them. Amongst the wider Greek-speaking population, however, the Arvanites and the language Arvanitika were viewed in past times in a derogatory manner. These views contributed towards shaping negative attitudes held by Arvanites regarding the language and thereby increasing assimilation. In post-dictatorial Greece, the Arvanites have rehabilitated themselves within Greek society through, for example, the propagation of the Peloponnesian theory regarding Arvanite origins. The theory created a counter-discourse that aimed to give the Arvanites a positive image in Greek history by claiming the Arvanites as the ancestors and relations of contemporary Greeks and the culture. The Arvanite revival of the Peloponnesian theory has also been recently borrowed by other Albanian-speaking populations within and from Albania in Greece to counter the negative image of the communities. Arvanitic culture. Fara is a descent model, similar to Scottish clans and Malaysia tribes in northern Albania. Arvanites were organized in faries mostly during the reign of the Ottoman Empire. The apical ancestor was a warlord and the pharaoh was named after him. In an Arvanitic village, each pharaoh was responsible to keep genealogical records that are preserved until today as historical documents in local libraries. Usually, there were more than one pharaohs in an Arvanitic village, and sometimes they were organized in phratries that had conflicts of interest. Those phratries didn't last long, because each leader of a pharaoh desired to be the leader of the phratry and would not be led by another. Role of women. Women held a relatively strong position in traditional Arvanitic society. Women had a say in public issues concerning the pharaoh, and also often bore arms. Widows could inherit the status and privileges of their husbands and thus acquire leading roles within a pharaoh, as did, for instance, Laskarina Bubalina. Arvanitic songs. Traditional Arvanite folk songs offer valuable information about social values and ideals of Arvanitic societies. Dress. The traditional clothing of Arvanites included distinctive attire that sometimes identified them in past times as Arvanites from other neighboring populations. Arvanite males on the Greek mainland wore the fustella, a pleated-like skirt garment to kill, while those who lived on some Aegean islands wore bagwe breeches of the seafaring Greeks. Arvanite women were known for wearing a chemise shirt that was heavily embroidered. They also wore a heavily embroidered fundia gown-like garment that was heavily embroidered in silk, and on the mainland the saguni, a woolen thick white coat. On the Aegean Islands, Arvanite women wore silk gowns with Turkish influences. Terms for Arvanite female clothing were in Arvanitika rather than in Greek. Notable Arvanites: Greek War of Independence, Andreas Verkosmiaoulis, Admiral Laskarina Boubalina, the only female member of Philiki Eterea, Georgios Kountouriatis, from Hydra, Admiral Dimitris Plapoutas. Presidents of Greece: Pavlos Kountouriatis, Admiral. Prime Ministers of Greece: Antonios Krietsis, Alexandros Diamidis. Politicians: Theodoros Pangalos, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Deputy Prime Minister. Clergyman: Archbishop Hieronymus II of Athens, incumbent Archbishop of Athens. Military: Theodoros Pangalos, general and briefly military dictator. Artists: Nikos Enganopoulos, painter and poet.